For an autistic person, there's obviously a lot of sensory processing differences that can impact your experience of eating. You've got the food itself, but outside of that, you've also got the environment that you're in, the sound, the temperature, if you're eating with someone else, what sounds they might be making, the cutlery, the chair that you're sitting on. It's a whole big sensory experience eating. So if you've got differences in that area, that's obviously going to impact the experience. As a clinician, what is your experience of the ways in which that can impact autistic people?
I think what's important to remember is a lot of autistic individuals experience sensory input at a heightened state, and they can have difficulties modulating their sensory input. So all sounds might sound at the same level, so it might sound really loud. So the sound of someone chewing might sound like a siren going off next to you. Different textures are maybe going to be more pronounced. And when it comes to food, often textures can be a bit unpredictable, especially around meat or fruit and things like that, where they can change and vary based on, time of year, how long you've had that fruit in for, that kind of thing. What's also really important to remember is that smell and taste are really, really closely linked, and that a lot of what we taste comes from what we smell. And again, if you're not modulating the smell of the food in front of you compared with the cleaning products used in that environment, then it could feel like you're tasting something that's chemical or unnatural, that your body's saying, oh, this isn't right, don't put this in your mouth, this is potentially poison. And it's really difficult to tease apart those connotations once they've been made.
Yeah, that's really true. I think that really impacts the sort of areas like hospitals or work canteens that tend to have those cleaning smells, and also that like generic food smell that just is like old, not good food, I became a vegetarian actually because as a child I found that meat was so unpredictable. You would sometimes come across like a bit of grizzle in a sausage, and then it was just really, really off-putting, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that. And also like my own emotional state around what this food was and where it came from started to impact me. James, you were telling me about some unusual connections that you'd made between foods and inanimate objects, and I found that really interesting. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, so obviously like one of the things that makes autistic people interesting, it's one of the things that I think makes us great, is that we have these connections that we can make so easy. It's why we're special interests, because we lock onto something and then we just want to know everything about it. But that means that incident or whatever happens, it kind of can taint things sometimes. So for example, when I was watching Saved by the Bell when I was younger, there's like an episode where like a balloon sort of pops up and it's like a bit of a surprise. And I was eating like a chocolate bar at the same time. And as it happened, like all I could suddenly taste in my mouth was like the latex of the balloon. And it's something that just sat with me. Like it's something that I could never sort of shake off. So any time I go anywhere near that type of chocolate, like that latexy like taste in the back of my throat. And it's like nails on a chalkboard, because I can just like, it takes me back to that moment, even though it was 20 years ago. Like the connotation between chocolate and like a balloon just popping out in a kind of a shocking manner, it just sort of sits with me. And that's kind of something that will just persist even when I see other people eating it.
People often don't understand that kind of thing, because there's also this thing, isn't there, where oftentimes autistic people prefer a particular brand. It's not just this food, it's this particular brand of this food that feels safe and comfortable to eat, and we can be kind of accused of being precious or, special or extra, and then that comes with like an extra layer of awkwardness. So when this happens and you're struggling with eating, does the way that people react around you impact your experience?
If people are making efforts to try and sort of change the environment, or to trying to get something out of the way that might be a trigger for you, it means that you're more likely to focus on it and lock onto it. And it then means that you're not going to be able to get away from it. So by trying to do something, they're actually making it worse in the long run. A lot of autistic people, we eat all the time. Like we have to eat throughout the day. So we know what works for us. We know what's going to help us in these situations. Give us the space to do that and we will find our way.
Yeah, I'd rather people didn't do anything almost. Like when I eat a particular meal, I like to have this particular sauce with this meal, but it's this particular brand of sauce. And some well-meaning people got me the sauce from a different brand. And I ended up like crying whilst trying to eat this meal, because I felt not only like I had the wrong meal, but also like I'd let people down, like they'd gone out of their way for me, and then I hadn't been grateful, and I was being childish or I was being silly, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. And I'd actually usually rather that, you just don't look directly at me and my eating stuff really, and just let me manage it the way I manage it. Like there are times when I can't eat at all and people are going, oh, would you fancy this? Would you fancy that? What about this? And that almost puts too much pressure on me. Do you ever feel like that?
Yeah, totally. When I go out for meals like at Christmas, it feels like it's such an important time that everything's got to be perfect and everything has to go exactly how, my family and friends want it to be. And I think that pressure to try and make it the perfect thing means that I'm more susceptible to sort of freaking out if something slightly goes wrong because I'm so conscious of what's going on around there. And it means that I'm not enjoying the food, I'm not enjoying the atmosphere like I would do if it hadn't been made such a big deal out of it at the time.
There are going to be people watching who are supporting their autistic loved ones. If they're worried about their eating, what would you advise?
When it comes to supporting people who you love and their eating, I think what's important to remember is even if that person's eating the same thing all the time, they're still eating, they're still getting nutrients from that food. I think sometimes people can cling on to the fact sometimes that they're eating the same thing over and over again. I quite often would reflect and say, well, are they having enough calories? Hopefully, yes. Are they still hitting kind of the main food groups? Hopefully, yes. So it's just taking back that judgment and that assumption that to enjoy food and to have, a good quality of life, that you need variety. I think that's something that's a bit of a misconception. I think sometimes just being, like you say, not even drawing attention to it, quite often it's really nice to eat kind of like buffet style or whatever. So you can like just lay the food out there. So you're not dishing up, you're not making assumptions about quantities or whatever. And then that person can just help themselves and not having that pressure to eat at that point and trusting that autistic person to look after themselves in their own time.
That's a really good suggestion. And it's something I do for myself, actually. If I am struggling to eat, I will put out a buffet as if I'm doing it for someone else. I'll just put food around me. I don't have to eat it. It's just there. And then eventually I might find that I do eat it, because I think you made a really good point about the pressure of a full plate. I think that can be quite overwhelming because you feel like you've got to eat it all or something.
It can almost be over-facing before you've even started. And then it's about them making choices. Where do I start? What do I eat first? What textures are going to go together, that kind of thing. So it might be, oh, I just want to start with some bread. And then, you finish your bread and, oh, I'll have some fruit, or whatever it is that, takes your fancy. Because if it's all there together and you've got different textures on a plate, different smells, visually it looks different, it can be very overwhelming.
I have a bit of a strategy as well that I find that as the day goes on and I become more overwhelmed, I'm less able to eat. So I try and start with a decent breakfast with as many different ways of putting goodness into that. Sometimes that's a smoothie and you can put loads of stuff in there. And James was telling me about a technique called
Food chaining.
Yeah. Could you tell me about that?
So that's basically because like a lot of autistic people have restricted diets. People think that means they're limited to just that, but actually, obviously, it's not the food that they've become attached to. It's that taste, it's that smell, it's all the things that relate to that exact food. But other foods do contain components that relate to that. So one of the techniques that people do to sort of branch out and try more things, tricking themselves into adding things. So you're saying if you make pancakes, you might try and put some fruit in that you wouldn't usually have because you're sort of masking it with a pancake. Or I was thinking like mashed potatoes, the holy grail for this situation, because you can hide anything in that. And then slowly but surely you sort of introduce more and more food because, like I say, the connotation you might have made might have changed ages ago. The tastes, everyone's taste buds are constantly changing. So you might find that something you didn't like and you thought tasted exactly like this, it's completely changed. And when you have that mouthful of it in sort of, in the modern day, in the modern time, then you're ready to like experience a new flavor, and it's just a new experience that you're associating with it, because sometimes you've locked yourself away from that type of food because of one bad incident. So you can create a new one by sort of surprising yourself in a way, by having it with something that is going to make you feel good, something that you enjoy, something that is routine and regular to you. And then from there, you've got this new meal that you can have connotations with, and then you sort of just move on to another, like you introduce something that relates to that, introduce something that relates to that, and eventually sort of your palate does widen, you can have more food, and it becomes less challenging to find that one meal wherever you go.
I think there isn't any one strategy that's going to work, because honestly, I hear that strategy and feel like, oh no, don't hide anything in my food. But that works for you and hopefully will work for someone listening. For me personally, I kind of go the opposite way of like, I only have to have one spoonful of this food and then I can not eat it. And then sometimes having that one spoonful would mean that actually I like this, and now I find that I'm eating it. So I more have to kind of think about tricking myself in terms of you don't have to eat a whole meal, you just have to eat a little bit. So I think there is a little bit of an element of trial and error and figuring out what works for you.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you personally. Like there's that story of an autistic boy who basically would only eat pink things because he had seen Calpol when he was younger. When he was ill, he'd always been given Calpol. So pink to him was really healthy because Calpol's got that luminous pink colour. So to get around that, some people started putting pink food colouring in all of his meals. So he must have had like the most artistic dishes, but it meant that he could eat all the different things. And that's just by focusing on what it is that person likes about that meal and then branching out that way. Yeah, I wouldn't advise like sneaking different types of food into other people's, because that could just create even more negative connotations and, just lose trust in the people who are serving you food. So yeah, no, there's different strokes for different folks.
So I think there's a key message here, isn't there, in that the autistic person needs to be in charge?
100%. It's so complex because you don't know if it's to do with a connotation that's been made. You don't know if it's something that's going on in the environment. So it's all down to what that person is experiencing at that time. I think when people are looking to sort of help someone who has like a challenging diet, the first thing that we're told to do is just write a diary, make a note of everything they see, smell, what was going on at that time. Like no detail is too small. And that way, when you are trying to find sort of a solution or something that can help people, let's say branch out, it'll be in there. There'll be something in there that is consistent, like something consistently happens at the time around the food, whether it be the food itself, like an element of the food being too close to each other and different textures ruining it, or if it's during that day, you might live near a school and you hear a school bell go off at that time every single day, and that's what's causing it. And just having this diary of just evidence that you can refer to and you can try and find out what's going on, that can really make a huge difference. When you are trying to sort of support an autistic person with their diet, it is better to let them lead the way. And because so many things affect how an autistic person eats, what's going on around them, the connotations that they've made of the food, the taste, you've got to really sort of just record everything and try and discover what that is through a bit of investigation, a bit of a private investigation for yourself. And that means that, you can never start this too early, but when you start suspecting that there is a challenge with someone eating, start documenting everything before, during, and after they start eating. So what can they smell? What sounds are going on around them? What's on the plate? How is the plate presented? The more and more these things happen, the more you start to see a pattern in something that's going on.
So one of the senses that we talk about less is interoception. Obviously, interoception is our awareness of our body's internal and emotional processes. So things like knowing when you're hungry or when you're thirsty. So obviously, this can impact you from the perspective of whether you remember to eat or notice you need to eat, but also because it so massively impacts the experience of emotions and how you're experiencing something, and being able to recognize that can make it quite complicated as well. Is this something that you could speak to me about, Leanne?
A misconception about interoception is that people never feel hungry or they never feel thirsty. Sometimes it could be that you don't feel it and then suddenly you're starving, or, your mouth feels like the Sahara Desert. And I think what's important in those kind of scenarios is to plan, which obviously is very difficult sometimes for autistic individuals. So, it's making things easier for yourself. So I love your example, Ella, where you said, I like to have a really kind of hearty breakfast because I'm kind of fresh at the day. Also, maybe it's something easier to put into your routine because it's at the start of the day rather than thinking about trying to put something in the middle, which can be quite challenging. I think it's a case of having kind of your safe foods and your easy foods. So maybe it's a cereal bar or a smoothie, like you say. So that's there. So you can have some kind of nutrients to kind of feed your body, feed your brain. Because the worst thing is to suddenly feel starving and then having to try and plan to make a meal. So that would be my advice kind of around that. And, making sure, I think sometimes people find it easier to drink from a bottle of water. So carrying that around with them in the day, rather than thinking about having to go and get a cup and go to the sink or whatever. Making things enticing. So maybe if you have a special interest and you have, a Pokemon cup that you can carry around with you that's going to kind of draw your eye. So it's easier. It's a reminder to kind of drink and that when your body's not kind of giving you those internal signals.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I have a couple of other strategies that I'll share. One is that I tend to eat at the same time. Yeah. So I'm not following my hunger signals so much as following a routine. And another thing that I'll do is I'll be like, I'm not sure if I'm hungry, and I'll eat like a small thing to see, like to test the waters to see if I'm hungry, and then I'll be like, oh, I am hungry. Now I should eat a meal. Do you ever have any experience of this?
Yeah, I think because it's such an experience when we eat, your mind can be a bit of a dangerous place. So just making yourself like more spontaneous. If you think, oh, I need to eat something, I need to have a big meal now to fuel me throughout the day, to fuel me for what to do, it can be overwhelming. And, your mind goes wild trying to think of all the different things that would be perfect. Like maybe if I had protein for this, I'll go harder. Or maybe if I had carbohydrates, I'll be able to do something for longer. So just turn your house into a buffet and just have like snacks and crisps and different things scattered there. And it just becomes like, you're not even thinking about it, you just walk past and you grab something. And as long as in the planning phase of when you're getting those snacks, you are thinking of, what has good nutrition. Because as you said before, it doesn't matter if you are picky, so long as you are getting all the nutrients that you need. You can be as picky as you want, as long as you are being healthy, then what's wrong with that? Some people who are the most healthy out of us are probably the most picky out of us.
So as well as the sensory impact on food that we've just discussed, another aspect can be like the executive functioning challenge of making food happen. You've got to plan the meal, you've got to buy the food, you've got to fit the food in your fridge, which is a jigsaw, and then you've got to want the meal that you planned a week ago on the day that you planned to eat it, which so rarely happens. Have you got any tips for how to manage that?
The first thing I'd say is be kind to yourself, and sometimes things don't go to plan. And you might have the best will in the world and think, yeah, I'm going to make a meal plan and I'm going to buy lots of vegetables and fruits and I'm going to cook things from scratch. And you just don't have capacity to make that happen. Let go of the guilt that might go with that you've let food go to waste or that kind of thing. Most important thing is looking after you, making sure you're getting fuel into your body. So if that does mean actually that food plan's gone to waste and I'm going to get a takeaway or I'm going to shove a frozen pizza in the oven, that's absolutely okay. Making it easier for yourself, having alternatives. So you might think, yeah, I want to make spaghetti bolognese on Wednesday, but that doesn't happen. Maybe having a safe alternative that's easy, that's accessible in your kitchen is a happy medium, isn't it, between living that life where you batch cook and you plan your meals and having takeaway every night.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, because I think there is a part of me that does want to be that person with the, carefully organised vegetable drawer and a plan and batch cooking and really, really impressive packed lunches. But the reality is that if I have a microwave meal as an alternative, then I'm more likely to do that. Another thing that I do is I'll plan 5 meals for the week, but I won't assign them to a specific day so that I can decide what I want on that day, but I have made a plan and I've organised the stuff. How do you manage this challenge?
Yeah, so obviously everyone wants to eat healthy. Everyone wants to have the food that, makes them feel incredible and, ones that like doctors and teachers have always told us to do. But food's also kind of like an emotional thing. We have comfort food for a reason. And as autistic people, sometimes we need that security, that safety that some of the food brings us. So I just try and approach it of what I want that day and what I want that moment is what I'll go to. But like learning not to feel guilty about going for the cheap and probably not most nutritious option is something that's like helped me quite a lot recently, especially like, if I have a hard day, I can just go across the road and be like, pizza. Yeah, I get pizza, set up, put it in the oven, saves time. It doesn't require a lot of thinking. It doesn't require a lot of planning. And then I can just get to like, relaxing and sort of make myself get calm after, a day that might not have been the easiest.
It's about that energy bank, isn't it? If you've had a day where you're really busy and you're really overloaded, then you're not going to be able to manage the extra challenges. I think we can sometimes have that like all or nothing thinking of like either we're doing it all perfectly or not at all. And I'm trying to find a middle ground there where like there are days that I can be the Ella that does that, and there are days that I'm the Ella that needs to eat the pizza, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, and it goes back to the connotations we make, because when you spend ages making food, it suddenly feels like you're eating the effort, and it's like, oh, this is draining. This food wasn't worth it. But like, if you can just nip across the road and grab some food, it's like, okay, this was really easy. I'm in an easy place now, and that's kind of what you want from your food. Like, you want it to comfort you.
In terms of actual planning, I think some of the tips that I would give are online shopping. Thank goodness for online shopping. I do not want to go into supermarkets.
We're very fortunate to live in a world now where we can reduce the social demand on ourselves when we go out. So, self-checkout's a thing. You don't have to do the social niceties that can be a bit of a struggle on top of everything. Again, shopping online, you don't even have to deal with the sensory overload of going into a shop. If it works for you, shop almost daily or every couple of days so you are buying in what you fancy and eating what feels right for you in that moment.
And I think also letting go of the norms, the preconceived ideas of how we have to do things. You don't have to eat toast for breakfast and a big meal for dinner. You don't have to eat at the same times as everybody else. You can really, like, we all have an instinct about how to fuel ourselves. And if we give ourselves a chance to relax and lean into that, then it's okay if you have pizza for breakfast and cereal for dinner, I think, really.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel practical to go across the road and buy food every single day. But you know what else isn't practical? Ordering a bunch of food that just goes mouldy in your fridge and you don't have. So yeah, don't be so hard on yourself if you are, constantly in and out of the local supermarket.
So if all else fails, a lot of autistic people have got what we call safe foods, which is a food that you know that you're going to be able to prepare easily. That's probably going to be quite predictable, the same every time. It's going to be easy to eat. It's going to be comforting. It's going to be quick. At the moment, my safe food is, for some reason, porridge. And I'll always just eat that if I run out of ideas for what else to eat. Do you have a safe food, James?
Yeah, it'd probably be pancakes. I think that's because, as you said, like I have complete control. I know all the ingredients that go in. There's not that many ingredients that go in. And there is that sort of versatility to shake it up. Like you can have it as savoury. You can put like a bit of bacon on it or something. And that way, I'm still getting that thing that I am aware of, that I know, that I can count on. But, it's in a different package, which gives me, a bit of extra flavour, a bit of diversity in the day.
I think there can also be like eating out safe foods. So there is a particular place that many of us know that I'm not going to name that can often be a common safe food for autistic people. And I think it is because they're all over the country, in fact, all over the world, and they're pretty predictable and you will get the same thing everywhere that you go. And so if I've had a long day and we've got to eat out, like say on the way home from somewhere, my husband will always be like, we'll go there because I know you'll be okay. Is that a fairly common thing as well in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about sensory processing, a lot of autistic individuals have very refined palates. They can smell things a mile off, taste things that if they're slightly different. So again, that's why we see, wanting things the same down to the brand. You might even have like for each restaurant, that you visit, that I'm going to have that each time because it's safe. And again, you don't have to plan. You don't have to focus on reading the menu. It's there, it's tried, it's tested, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I hate it when a restaurant changes its menu and takes my safe food away. I think the other thing that I do that you've made me think is I can add sauce to something to make it a safe food. So I have a particular sauce that I will even sometimes take with me, which is probably not very classy, but who cares? That if I have to eat something that's maybe not my preferred choice, if I can have this sauce, it turns it into a safe food.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, I would say let go of that thought of, oh, it's not classy or it doesn't look good, rock up to your friend's house with your favourite sauce, if that's what's going to help you get through that meal or, through that situation, 100% go for it.
Yeah, and if they have got a problem with that, they're just not really your people, are they?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think what we're saying here, aren't we, is that ultimately there are a lot of neuronormative expectations around food, by which I mean that we should eat certain foods at certain times, that we should eat a certain way, that we should be buying certain things, none of which might work for you if you are an autistic individual. And so it is okay to lean into what works for you, to make the choices that feel right to you, and to enjoy food in the way that you enjoy it. If you found this video useful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.